Common Knowledge is brought to you by our friends at Game Grid Midvale, our local game store who puts players first with weekly competitive events, below market pricing, and the best customer service available. Check out their online inventory using the link in our description.
We are also sponsored by inkgaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all inked gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lawbert.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 88 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm the Brandon. That was the phone. I'm joined by the Lawbert.
What's up? Who is it?
It's just this stupid family chat. We basically just like spam memes and stuff at each other all day. That's basically all it is. So, how's it going?
Pretty good. Still this new post-ban meta, like at least in leagues, I'm enjoying. Like, my win rate is, I made a tweet about this, my win rate is just stupid high right now. Like, it should not be this high. It's hard to feel bad about the format when you're over 60% win rate.
I felt the same way about the last format. I didn't mind the Blue-Black Delver and the Just Sky format because I enjoyed playing both of those decks, and they were very, very good and gave me lots of wins. So I quite like those last formats. But I don't know. I just haven't had a lot of time to play, and so I just haven't. And I just kind of have been keeping my eye on league results, or not league results.
Challenge.
But yeah, the challenge results and stuff. Like, I read Alex Ullman's challenge breakdown when he puts those out, and like, it's just like all the decks that are doing really well right now are just kind of the decks that traditionally I've never liked. Like, I'm not a big fan of Tron decks. I've never been a super huge fan of the Boros decks. I don't know. So I'm not enjoying this format as much as you, Sean, but
yeah,
I mean, I still think it's, I don't know. It's definitely better than playing standard. At least there's no Oko. I guess Oko's not in standard anymore. He's in every other format. I guess there were 7 copies of Oko in the finals of the Legacy GP today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that card's just kind of outrageous. Like, I'm pretty glad we don't have to deal with that. Like, I think that's my favorite. That will always be my favorite thing about Pauper is no Planeswalkers. I hate Planeswalkers. I hate them. So at the end of the day, even if this is my least favorite version of Pauper, it is still a better format than most. So
I don't have anything else. We do have an announcement, though.
Yeah, announcement time. It is time for our monthly giveaway where we select a lucky patron who will be given a playset of all the cards from the past cards of the week. The lucky winner will be receiving a playset of Mantle of Tides, Palace Sentinels, Golden Egg, and something else.
This week's card of the week. Which will be a surprise. We're going to leave you in suspense until that segment of the show. So, Sean, who is our lucky, super, ultimate, special, awesome Patreon winner? We fired up the Google random number generator, and Josh Hubbard is the winner this week. So
thanks, Josh. Josh works really hard. He sells paint, and he gives us a portion of his paint money every month, and that means the world to us. He's also just one of our best friends.
Yeah.
Not because he sells paint, but because he's just a great guy.
Definitely. Yeah, he's like one of the people that I'm like, I could see him being on the show because I just like talking to him about Pauper enough. Like, we don't really do enough guests here, but he's one of the people that like, oh, that'd be really easy, and I like talking to him. But nobody, like, he doesn't have like a followership or anything, so we haven't had like a reason to be like, hey. And if one of us can't do the podcast for a week, we're just like, let's not do it.
Yeah. So everyone go follow Josh Hubbard so that we can justify having him on the show. Anyway, congratulations, Josh, and thank you so much for your support. You're the bestest around. No one's gonna ever bring you. Okay, card of the week.
Card of the week.
This week's card of the week you chose. It is Okiba Gang Shinobi. It is 3 black for a 3/2 creature rat ninja. It has ninjutsu for 3 and a black. If you're not familiar with ninjutsu, you can return an unblocked attacking creature to your hand and put Okiba Gang Shinobi in its place attacking. It says, whenever Okiba Gang Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player discards 2 cards.
Yeah, so the reason I chose this card for our card of the week is just because it's been making a showing in Boros Monarch decks. I'd say it's in at least 75% of the Boros Monarch deck lists at this point. I think it's sort of a response to Tron, how dominant Tron has been in challenges this last month. And this card is just a really, really good answer to them. They don't really have a lot of good opportunities to block it. And you can probably get in 2 hits with this easy.
And it's so that like when they have that flicker loop going, you can interact with their hand and get that out of there. If it hits, it is a 3-for-1 since it's a body, and then they discard 2 cards. And then there's gravy on top of that if you hit a second or third time. They're just going to have no hand. I think it is pretty rare because people go out of their way to make sure this doesn't hit them a second time.
Yeah, it's also sort of has a bit of dyssynergy where it's like it's really good against Tron if it connects, but Tron's entire thing is just you don't get combat steps.
That's true, yeah.
So, I mean, this card can just be kind of dead in your hand if they've already got their loop online. If they're already just stonehorning you out of the game, this could just get stuck in your hand because you never get a combat step. Or you're just forced to cast it for 5, and then you still just don't get combat steps.
Unfortunately, that is true. I hadn't really considered that, but I don't know. Previous to this, it was a card in mono black sideboards, but since the ninjutsu only has a single black in it, we can splash it in decks with Prophetic Prism.
Yeah, it's a really easy splash in those decks. Not to mention, one of the upsides of ninjutsu are returning that card to your hand, and the Monarch decks are just full of cards that have ETB effects. You know, they want to replay their core Skyfishers for more value, etc. Another kind of big upside is ninjutsu is uncounterable. It's not a spell, it's an ability. And, you know, there's no stifles. Yeah. I was trying to think, I was like, does stifle counter this? It does.
You still return the creatures to your hand, but you don't get to put the other one in.
Does it as a graveyard, or does it stay in your hand?
It just stays in your hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like part of the cost is returning it to your hand, but then
Stifle should just be Pauper.
I think so.
That would be a fun card, right? I think we've talked about this before on cards we want.
I think so, yeah.
Anyway, so there are some good upsides to just having a ninjutsu creature in your deck. This card is a 3/2 though, which does make it kind of weak against other Skyfisher effects, but theoretically, if this is in play, being blocked by a Skyfisher, it's already hit at least once, and in which case, you know, it is a 2-for-1 against Skyfisher decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a 3-for-1 because the Skyfisher already got value, so it is a 2-for-1.
Yeah, and I do think it still has, like, turn 4 playing this isn't late enough that it's like, oh, they're just not going to have cards in their hand anymore. It is going to get value, so this is just an extra value slot where it is slowing down that deck, but I don't think it's the end of the world. But I think that's it. That's Okiba Gang Shinobi.
Boom. All right. So, Josh Hubbard, you're going to also be receiving a playset of Okiba Gang Shinobis. Alrighty. So, let's jump into our main topic with November's power rankings.
Main topic.
Thanks, Deep Voice.
Voice.
I wanted to do it this time.
Alrighty, so power rankings. We still just have a huge disparity between first place and second place. I think it's just been months. Like, it's just huge disparities. Anyway, Tron, first place, 74 points. Tron won all but one challenge last month, which was last week's challenge. Tron only put one deck in the top 8, as opposed to the previous months where it had 9 top 8s.
Wow,
the
that's
previous
a lot.
weeks. Yeah, it top 8'd 9 times in 3 challenges, so it averaged 3 decks a week. And then this past week, it was just 1 deck in the top 8.
I mean, and it isn't at alarming levels yet. Like, this number is, I think, within reason for just looking at challenge results. Like, it's nowhere, it's not near where they've banned cards in the past. However, this is about where decks are usually in the first month after a ban, when they do start getting out of control. Right now, I don't think this is going to see a ban because there's ways that the format can combat a deck like this. I do think that people are already doing those things, and Tron it's standing up to it.
It's definitely not where, like, Jeskai decks and stuff were at, where we were, like, seeing triple digits. But,
Right.
yeah, I think the biggest thing with Tron is there are a few things working against it. One is it's just completely miserable to play against. And so if you're playing leagues, I don't think this number is reflected in the leagues because you're not seeing as many 5-0 Tron lists in leagues. I just don't think as many people are playing Tron. But when you look at these challenges, it's been just dominating on the competitive scene up until this very last week of the month where it had a significant drop-off. And we saw, I believe, Elves took it down. I got to check my notes really quick.
While you're looking for that, I did read the person who does challenge breakdowns on the Pauper Reddit. He was talking to some of the more dominant players, or some of the best players of Tron in the format, just through Discord.
Yeah,
and
I believe that was Alex Ullman, or did he just retweet it?
I don't know if he retweeted it or not, but
because I saw that article from Alex Ullman or something about how the most popular or the best Tron players weren't playing Tron
because they were bored, right?
Yeah,
like Tron.
Alex Ullman wrote that, or if he was just tweeting the Reddit of whoever. But
it is Nerd to the Core.
So that, yeah, Alex Ullman.
Is that the same person?
Yes, no. Nerd to the Core is Alex Ullman.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he was just saying that people are just getting bored. Like, Tron is one of those very hateable decks where you're just grinding, and then eventually the game, like, sputters to a close.
Yeah. So I do think, though, there are, like you said earlier, some really good ways to beat Tron. And I strongly believe this is the best deck in the format, but it is a deck that you can exploit. And so maybe let's just take a quick minute to talk about some of the good ways to beat Tron.
Okay.
For me, the biggest thing is finding ways to get around combat. Finding win conditions that don't involve turning a creature sideways and attacking.
Yeah, and that can also be tricky because that's going to be, if they're like disposable spells like burn spells, they can just weather the storm you out of the game. They do have to use their graveyard, so packing enough relics can help, but they're still going to come down with like Dinner Over Horrors. I think one of the best ways to do it, but unfortunately decks that aren't performing well right now are counterspell decks, because you can break that loop or stop one of their creatures from coming down while you have a big board and just win that way, right?
Yeah, like Tron is sort of at its core. I would put it in like the Venn diagram. It would be in the middle of like combo and control. it's this control deck, but it's trying to get this combo finish of Ghostly Flicker plus one of its creatures, right? And it's trying to make that loop. And so if you can find ways to disrupt that loop, that's one way to attack it. But the other important part is to have a clock, right? Clock plus disruption is always the best way to beat burn. And some of the best ways, and that's sort of why we're seeing cards like Okiba Gang Shinobi, right? Like, that's going to help you provide that disruption to the deck and still help you with a clock. So, I'm thinking decks that can specifically play the card Pyroblast. So I'm thinking about burn. Like if you can just jam 4 Pyroblasts in your burn deck or something to fight the Tron decks. You can attack them with your creatures. And I don't know, maybe you should be playing the Orcish Hellraiser. I know you don't play that card anymore, but I don't know. Maybe that's just what you need to do, and you need to just try to counter their spells and attack them, burn them out.
I have played a bunch of burn, and I will say that I don't think you should be playing Orcish Hellraiser right now. One, you don't want to be trying to go through in combat, and that's a lot of what that card is doing. If you want to do more non-combat damage, stick to something like Firebrand Archer
or Firebrand. Okay.
Yeah, because like I know right now you're playing like Gitu Lava Runner. That's fine because you're doing the damage so early that you're still getting the numbers you'd want out of that card. But if you were really concerned about that, I would go with a different card. It's not going to do as well against the other decks in the meta, but I don't know. I don't think burn has to really change anything. I think that deck is fine. Like if you want to gear against Tron, maybe just go for higher numbers of your land destruction spell, Molten Rain.
Okay. Yeah, like 4 Molten Rains.
Yeah, and the board.
Alrighty. Another deck that I feel like has chops against Tron is Black-White Pestilence.
Really?
Like
I don't think so.
It has disruption.
It does, but it doesn't have that clock.
I mean, you see a lot of these Pestilence decks are playing what's the thing?
I don't know.
The 2/3.
Core Sky Fisher?
No, True Name Nemesis.
Oh. But just you remember in the playoff video that we watched, at Oasis Games, we watched that matchup, and the Black-White deck had to really get like all of their castigates going, and then it was a grind fest, and they eventually won. It was still really hard. Tron is still the bigger deck and really hard to interact with. I think that Tron is just going to outvalue them or whatever.
Probably, but I mean, Tron is just clearly better than every deck in this format. So we're just talking about decks that can give you a chance at beating it. I think Pestilence has a good chance. Like between like Duress and Castigates, you have tons of ways to interrupt their hand. You can board in relics because you don't care about your graveyard, so you can fight them on that axis. And then Pestilence is a way to burn them out of the game that doesn't involve combat.
I still think I would prefer to go with just play an aggressive strategy, have some relics, call it a day. Like I don't want to try that hard to try to beat Tron.
Yeah, but you're only playing leagues. And like we also have to think about the players who want to play challenges too, right?
Yeah, but I have played against Tron for a long time, and I feel like that's working for me. Like my win rate against Tron has been, let me just look. I mean, I have only played 5 games. Burn, I'm overwhelmingly positive. Slivers, I'm pretty positive. I think that might just be luck, since the Slivers list I'm running doesn't have relics, and I am missing them. And then Stompy is, I haven't won a game yet. I don't know. I think that you might end up shooting yourself in the foot if you try too hard against that deck. Like I saw someone say, like, unfortunately, Tron can decide what kinds of decks it wins against. If it's a Tron deck that's more geared against aggro decks, yeah, you're going to be disadvantaged. But if they're more geared against mid-range and control decks, you're going to have a better chance. So just like still bring your best, assert your best win rate overall and just try to win the game without trying to gear too hard. I think that's a dangerous path to go down, and I try to avoid it. But that's...
So could that be a contributing factor then to Tron's success, is that if you're trying to gear against it, you just are bad against the rest of the field, or you could just be geared against the wrong version of Tron and lose. And so that could just be a reason Tron is doing so well right now.
Yeah, kind of like the more you struggle, the more you're stuck.
Interesting. So Tron is like quicksand.
Yeah. But I mean, our second place deck is Burn, and I think that is an answer to Tron. Burn, it does have a good Tron matchup, and it has pretty good matchups overall. So I think if you want to beat Tron, playing Burn is fine, and minor adjustments to that are okay.
Yeah, I think that if I were going to play a league or a challenge, I would play Burn. That would be my deck of choice, just because I don't know that I could stomach playing Tron. I would shoot myself in the foot.
Yeah, I think I agree.
I just, if my choices were not playing a challenge or playing Tron in the challenge, I would just not play the challenge. So, but yeah, I think I would play Burn. That would be my go-to choice. And you're thinking, though, the best strategy as the Burn deck is to just get the most optimized Burn list for the field, but just max out on Molten Rains in your sideboard.
I still think, like, if you're trying to, like, if you're not afraid of going too far, yes, play a lot of Molten Rains in your sideboard. But I also think just 3 Molten Rains is fine. Those other slots are very, very useful against other things. Like, there's a lot of Stompy running around. And I'm finding the reason I'm off of Hellraiser is Keldon Marauders is a better sideboard card against Stompy.
It's because it's a 3/3, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, you can block with it against one of their 2/2s and then attack. Like, that threat is pretty big. It really just fogs them a lot of the time.
Okay. All right, so Burn, that was our second place deck with 38 points. Our third place deck with 34 points is Boros Bully.
Yeah, and I am seeing a lot of this running around. The removal, like, it does have a lot of the smaller removal spells, and I think that's good against a lot of the average deck in the meta. Is like, Firebolts are fine right now, and there's not so many flyers that if you're playing an aggressive flyer strategy, that's pretty good too.
Yeah, it can be not explosive, because I mean it takes you a minute to kind of go wide, but it kind of, like, I feel like this deck leaves Tron with the make Stonehorn Dignitary or bust draws. You know, this deck is so hard for them to try to, like, Din Rova out of the game. Like, it's not going to give them the time, 1, and 2, it's just going to go so wide that Din Rova Horror is just kind of laughable. And so it's sort of just like Tron has to get Stonehorn Dignitary going, like a loop there going. Otherwise, eventually they're just going to attack you with Rally the Peasants for lethal.
Yeah, it does have some other things going for it. Like, it can just burn out the last 10-ish points of the game, and it has like a fairly aggressive start where it's playing a 1-drop on 1, it plays a Secret of the Way on 2, and then just like beat. And then they start expending resources to get that loop going, and then just burn the rest of the way. Like, that's a fine strategy. It also has Pyroblast in the board. This is a good Pyroblast deck, like you were saying.
Oh yeah, very good Pyroblast deck. All right, so that was Boros Bully.
It doesn't hurt that Bully's matchup against Burn is pretty decent.
Yeah. Fast Clock, Secret of the Way is a house against that deck. I could see... I don't know. I could see this deck struggling against some of the faster Stompy draws.
Yeah,
this deck doesn't quite have as much removal as like the traditional Monarch decks, because they're making room for Rally the Peasants, Faithless Looting, etc. So they're not quite as much removal.
Unfortunately, I haven't played against the bully decks when I've played Stompy, so I'm not going to speak to that. But I think I see what you're saying, and that sounds right.
Yeah, Savage Swipe is just really good against this deck. Like Seeker of the Way is kind of tough. It's like one of your best card against aggressive matchups, but it's very, very bad against Savage Swipe.
Yeah, the deck does have built-in like instant speed removal, so that if you wait a little bit, you can just be like, okay, 2 for 1 you, and then my guy's like, you haven't killed it, and you're gonna have to dig another 4 cards in. And,
that's kind of like Magical Christmas Land, though. Like that, you have a chance to save your mana, right, or your removal spell.
Yeah,
set that up.
The pressure is pretty intense.
Yeah, they're going to put so much pressure on you that if you don't do anything meaningful on turn 2 to interact, like, I mean, you could just have like a draw where you're just like, I have three removal spells, and so like, turn 2 I'll Journey to Nowhere a thing, and then turn 3 I'll play my guy with Lightning Bolt up, and then you just kind of gotta hope they don't have like Vines of the Vastwood or something.
Yeah, you did
their thing, but.
You did just mention Journey to Nowhere. Journey to Nowhere alone is a good way to host Stompy. Like, they do go all in on one creature. That's pretty much their deal. And then if you can just, Journey it, you've bought yourself like 3 turns there. Not to mention, if you've dumped any Prismatic Strands in the yard, you're pretty well off.
I don't think Bully plays Prismatic Strands.
I don't understand why you'd be playing Faithless Looting without playing Prismatic Strands. Like, I thought that was part of the point.
Maybe. Yeah. This list does. Okay, it does. Yeah. It does have Prismatic Strands. Alrighty, so 4th place is Boros Monarch with 33 points.
I do like to kind of... Maybe I do this too much, but I group Monarch. I'm just like, if Monarch and Bully were mashed together, because there is like a 50 card overlap or something like that, what would that be at? It is still less than Tron. It's 67 points together. So I think if you're trying to like gear against the meta, if you go, I want to gear against Tron and I want to gear against Boros decks, Burn actually fails that test on the Boros side, I think. It's not horrible, but it is definitely not a positive matchup. But your Tron matchup is so good that it is... I think it deserves that 2nd place slot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you're looking at this, you're good against a lot of the rest of the field, too. Looking at the rest of what our top 8 is. There's a lot of good decks here for Burn. So I don't know. What do you think? What, Monarch or Bully? Like, what do you think? I kind of right now I'm on the side of Bully. I think that's the deck I would rather be playing in this current format. I
think just because it's a little bit more aggressive, I would think that your matchup against Tron is a little bit more positive. Like I think I'm on Team Bully.
Yeah. Yeah, they both play Palace Sentinels. Like, both decks play Palace Sentinels, so... Yeah, that's not a thing. Yeah, I think I'd rather be playing Bully in this format. I do think Monarch is slightly better against the rest of the field. Not by a lot, though. But I do think Bully is better against Tron.
Yeah, I think... So Monarch, one of the big differences, like, the easy way of telling when you're going through a bunch of lists is, does the list have those cantrip rocks, or doesn't it? And where Bully just doesn't have to spend time doing that, it has a little bit less card advantage, but it has a more aggressive stuff. And I like that. Like, I always go for the more aggressive decks.
Yeah, the one thing, though, that Monarch does have is the burn. Like, it has much more reach with its burn spells. That's true. The Bully decks really only have lightning bolts, and then the Monarch decks have lightning bolts, galvanic blasts. You'll see them playing Searing Blazes sometimes. So they have a lot more burn spells, so they can they can reach a lot deeper than the rally decks can if Tron's able to turn on its Stonehorn Dignitary lock.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Monarch also has Glint Hawk, which having an aggressive 1-drop I think is important. So,
But
I
an
don't know,
aggressive
maybe-
1-drop that comes down turn 3.
or turn 1. Why wouldn't it come down on turn 1?
I guess if you're going to bounce your Ancient Den.
Yeah, I'm bouncing my Ancient Den with Tron every time I'm playing my Glint Hawk on turn 1 against Tron. And I'm attacking for as much damage as I possibly can, and then I'm throwing 3 Galvanic Blasts at their face. Like, that's your game plan. I don't know. I think I'm actually convincing myself that I'd rather just be playing Monarch.
Okay.
I don't know. I think maybe Monarch might just be better. It's less vulnerable to sideboard cards like Electrickery. You still get access to cards like Molten Rain and Pyroblast in your sideboard, just like Bully.
I mean, I would play like a modified version of Bully. Like, I can't cast Squadron Hawk. I refuse to ever cast Squadron Hawk again. I've lost too many games
Card is bad.
to casting Squadron Hawk. So I'd find something else there.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, can you just figure out like a way to play a bunch of artifact lands in your deck and just play Glint Hawk in that slot?
Probably.
I'm just going to go look at a deck list. Okay, this deck list does not have Glint Hawk. Okay. I was going to be like, well, they just already play Glint Hawk, and I sound like an idiot.
No, yeah, they don't.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe you could just figure out a way to play Glint Hawk in that slot.
Maybe I just want to play Boros Metalcraft. I know that deck has really fallen out of favor. Like
Kuldotha Boros stuff?
Not Kuldotha Boros. I think there's some parts of that I don't like.
So what are you metalcrafting for?
Just play 1-mana 3/3. Play like the Ariok Sun Chaser.
Sun Chaser. Okay.
Yeah, and just like I think that's irrelevant because like like I think I would play something close to Bully, but not Bully. So my choice is like granted neither, but closer to this one. Yeah.
Gotcha. Alrighty. So yeah, I don't know. I think after the discussion and hearing myself talk about things out loud, I'm Team Monarch.
All right.
I think that this deck has, while I do think it is probably still slightly weaker against Tron, potentially, I think it's so close that it's like negligible. And I think Monarch does have a better matchup against the rest of the field. So
there is also the chance that you're just going to see a bunch of Delver decks, and where Bully is just the deck built to beat up Delver. Like that's where it gets its name.
I don't think you're going to see any Delver decks. Does that deck exist? Do
I
you play against that deck a lot?
Yes, I have
Really?
been like between Scred and Mono Blue in leagues, yeah. But like, I'm not saying that I'm expecting it. I'm saying that all things the same. Like, I prefer Bully, and if I do happen to just wander into a weird area of a bunch of Delver decks, I'm just gonna beat everybody up.
Okay. For the sake of if you want to play in a challenge, my answer would be Monarch if you're looking at one of these two decks. And I think that you're probably safe to also play Monarch in a league. And if you do happen to wander into this really weird place where there are Delver decks, you still have a fine Delver matchup. It's not horrible, but... Alright, so that was 4th place. Boros Monarch, 33 points. 5th place, with 22 points, we have Elves. I don't like this deck.
You don't?
No.
Yeah.
What are you beating? You're not beating Tron. You're not beating Burn. You're losing Bully and Monarch.
All right.
What are you beating?
Maybe you are beating Burn?
Really? I've never beat Burn.
Huh.
I've never beat Burn with Elves. That is a horrible matchup.
You are beating Stompy.
Okay, so a deck we haven't even covered on the list yet.
Yeah.
Not making me feel better. I think that like unless your name is Kendra Smith and you are just a stone cold master with little green men, I would have played Elves. That's my opinion.
I thought it did have a positive matchup against the Boros decks, since you were just able to refill so much, and like you have a plan for the Electricity out of your board. Like you just
Okay.
like, quote unquote next level them, but like
Yeah.
they're boarding in Electricity.
Okay, maybe against Monarch you have a decent matchup for that reason, because you can refill with Lead the Stampede and such, and it's hard for them to keep up. Like they'll kill all your early threats and then be out of gas, and then you'll refill, and they'll have to try to figure out a way to do it again. Bully though, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is an elf format where you just have to be main decking Spider Silk Armor to get that extra point of toughness on all your creatures for like stompy matchups, or stompy slivers, bully.
I don't. I still don't think that's true. Like, I would rather have that slot be an extra Essence Warden or something like that. Like, just gain some life that's gonna buy you enough turns against both stompy slivers, fairies, that you can just like, okay, my draw spell has drawn me 4, my draw spell has drawn me 16. What? Like,
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, bully. There are a lot of decks, like a lot of the Monarch and bully decks, are main decking Electricities. So I don't know. I think that if I built an elf deck, looking at the decks that are like on this list, I would have 1 to 2 copies of Spider Silk Armor in my main deck. That's just me, though.
Ready for what is it? What are we on? 6?
Yeah. 6th place with 20 points is Scred Fairies. No Delvers. Just all the good stuff that you want to return to your hand with Ninja the Deep Hours. Fairy Miscreant, Spellsword Sprite, Augur Bolus, Ninja. Just 4 ofs. That's usually what the creature base is. And then it's a bunch of Lightning Bolts, a bunch of Screds, accumulated knowledges, counter spells, cantrips. That's your deck.
Which is more than fine. Like, playing Swirling Sandstorm on your board is going to get you pretty far. You are a counterspell deck, so that you can unlock yourself out of the Tron loop some of the time.
This is a good deck for Pyroblast. This is a really good Pyroblast deck.
Yeah, you are going to get beat up by the Boros decks, I think. Stompy's not a great matchup.
Probably not.
So it's struggling, but I
think that okay. It is like you said, it's going to get its win percentage against decks like Stompy in games 2 and 3 when it can bring in Swirling Sandstorms and just get a lot of value out of that. Not to mention, like, a bunch of Lightning Bolts and a bunch of Screds are always just good against decks that play X2 creatures. So I think that this deck can have a fine Stompy matchup, though I would still favor the Stompy deck here.
Yeah.
I don't like this deck at all against Boros Monarch or Boros Bully. Particularly Boros Monarch, just so many removal spells and big booties. And if you run into that Monarch player that is main decking Electricity, like, you're going to have a rough time. You've got 8 fairies in your deck. Traditionally, decks like this have also had a hard time against Burn. I guess if we just keep going up the list. Burn can put you on a clock, and they can deal you a lot of damage before you can set your mana up, before you can get in.
Sometimes that red does come pretty late, and they have a creature just doing work.
Yeah, I think part of the big problem is when you look at like these main decks, they really only have 4 counterspells, just 4 to Burn's 30 Lightning Bolts. So, they're gonna eventually just top deck Burn spells. Spellsword Sprite's good, but when you're trying to be proactive like this Fairies deck is, and like your game plan is hit with Ninja the Deep Hour, that's just not a very good game plan against Burn. And so you have to like adjust your game plan on the fly when you're playing against Burn and try to take this more reactive role, holding up mana for Spellsword Sprite counterspell. Yeah. And that just always doesn't hold up very well against Burn.
Like the games that the Scred deck wins or the mono blue deck, like that's not what we're talking about right now. But these mono blue, like these fairies decks, is what I'm trying to say. The games they win is when they pretty much completely lock their opponent out of playing spells. Like they let themselves get burnt down enough. They start doing some damage, and then they start hitting with ninjas and causing problems that way. And then they lock them out. Whereas the game's Burn wins, it's like, I resolved a Curse of the Purest Heart. And then they just had problems for the rest of the game because they were having to make aggressive plays because you have that inevitability. So I think the average game Burn wins, and then there are like the games where you're gonna just lock your opponent out of the game by countering them is the ones that Scred wins. But that's not horribly uncommon. It's just not average.
Yeah, I don't think it's like unwinnable. I just think that Burn is the favorite there. And against Tron, I think that this deck is fine against Tron. If you can land, it's one of those decks where if you're playing against Tron, you're safe to just jam Ninja the Deep Hours on turn 2. And that's a really, really good way to get ahead of Tron. You've got counter spells. You've got access to more counter spells in the sideboard. I think this deck probably has a fine to decent Tron matchup.
I agree. Yeah,
it's a deck that can find wins there. So rough against a lot of the field, probably decent against Tron, and again, Scred. It's always just kind of a solid game plan. Just like hit with Ninja the Deep Hours, burn their creatures with Scred, draw cards.
So I'm going to bring up an uncomfortable topic: Mill Delver.
You're thinking using Mill as an alternate way to kill Tron?
Yeah, like
combat.
That was something that somebody on Reddit was like, I have these 8 decks and I'm trying to choose what I'm going to play in the next challenge. And one of them was Delver Mill. And they're like, it has a very good Tron matchup. It's just, the problems that Fairies normally has are worse. Like, because your Burn matchups even worse, your Monarch matchups are horrible. Yeah. So
my argument is, I'm going to go back to one of the very first things you said at the beginning of this podcast, which was you shouldn't try to go hard on beating Tron.
I know, yeah.
Successful in this format, and playing Mill Delver is the extreme of going hard to beat Tron. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right. Number 7, Stompy.
18 points.
Stompy
boys. And we talked about this last week.
Yep. I don't know if we need to go into it much. Tron is actually a hard matchup because you don't interact with their flicker combo really at all. Even if you have a relic, the chances are they're going to Dinrova Horror it, and things aren't going to go your way.
Yep. Or they're just going to play Stonehorn Dignitary on turn 4, and you're not going to attack them.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of your best hope with Stompy is that you just have balls to the walls, nuts, smash them in the face, and you get them before they can really get anything going.
Yeah, like they didn't have it, and they're just digging for it, and you clocked them. Or they get it 4 or 5 turns later, they can't keep going. They haven't found their mnemonic wall. Like, one of their pieces is missing, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yep. So, and that is a non-zero number of games. Like, that does happen a lot with Tron. So, you could still win that way. Where do we like Stompy against the rest of this field?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's great. Like, Elves is bad. I don't feel great against playing any of the Boros decks because of Journey to Nowhere. Prismatic Strands are both super, super hard. They have a 2/3 that blocks all of your guys pretty easy. Enchanting any of your creatures is pretty tough since they have instant speed removal spells. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there, so I don't like that. I said Elves already is bad. Scred. You went against Scred pretty good.
Yeah, I think so.
And then I'm just going to say our last deck in our top 8 is kind of a surprise. It's Slivers.
Yeah. 15 points. So
you're not favored against Slivers either.
Yeah, so yeah, Sliver's in 8th place. It's got 7 more to go before I have to eat my fist.
I'm going to actually recant that. Because I've been playing, in preparation for our next week's episodes, a ton of Slivers. Stompy's ability to make one creature larger than any single sliver actually is enough a lot of the time.
What about Savage Swipe? Savage Swipe is probably good. Make your creature big and then fight one of their sliver lords and shrink the rest of their slivers.
Yeah, I definitely need to recant that, because that was a factor where just like before you get Lord like 4, like until your creatures are bigger than a 4/4, Savage Swipe is still a house. They have a bunch of evasive threats that they don't have to care so much, and one of their guys can just be huge. Their Carrion Ranger can untap that guy if they ever get it, so they're doing both. They're attacking, they're blocking, and it just becomes really difficult. So I think it's on this board because against all of these other decks, there are hands that just Stompy assembles just this Voltron creature and wins, but I don't think it's enough. I do think Stompy's overplayed because of some of the misconceptions where people think it will be good, and it just ends up getting points. It's an okay deck. Better than a lot of the decks in just like the field, like the decks that we're not going to talk about here, just like Black-White Pestilence, Affinity, Blue-Black Control, Mono-Blue Delver, Red Deck Wins. Like, it's better than a lot of the other ones, but ironically, I think Slivers might be better.
Interesting.
So let's talk about Slivers for a second, and I don't want to step on our own toes next week too much.
Yeah, because spoilers, we're going to do an episode on Slivers next week.
But I can just go through the matchups. Tron, again, is... the list I've been playing didn't even have relics in the sideboard. It's a Naya Slivers deck that is running red for Bladeback Sliver, so that when you're Hellbent, your Slivers can ping. And that's like your Tron tech. It's playing it over the Vigilance and Spinneret Sliver with Reach. And most of the decks, those cards aren't better than just like a 2/2. Like, you're not really doing that much with them. But as far as aggressive decks go, it is a pretty good just aggressive deck. You're playing a bunch of Lead the Stampedes and Winding Ways, and those cards do beat up on Boros decks because you just have more cards and can just refill more often than they can, and then you outclass their creatures. So when those are good matchups, I think Burn is not good, since you're not interacting with the other side of the board, so they can set up their creatures or their repeatable burn sources and then just start pointing things at your creatures. But Slivers is like a fine deck. As far as aggressive decks go, I think it might be the one.
The one to save us from Tron's tyranny.
No, it's not going to do that, but like
No?
The best of the aggressive decks, yeah.
Oh, okay. You think it? Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Unless you can't bully, then just play bully.
Yeah. So that was the top 8. Just to recap that, we had Tron on 74 points, Burn on 38 points, Boros Bully on 34 points, Boros Monarch on 33 points, Elves on 22 points, Skred Fairies on 20 points, Stompy on 18 points, and Slivers on 15 points. I have 2 honorable mentions.
Okay.
Before we close out. I'll just shout out the 9th place deck, which was Affinity. It came in on 13 points. I think this is a powerful deck. It has one of those interactions that, you can beat Tron without combat, which is a plus for me. Mm-hmm. Any deck that can do that, I'm a little high on right now. This deck just always has the same problems that Affinity faces. It's a little inconsistent, a little clunky. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to hate on with sideboard cards, but
yeah,
it's just always going to have those problems that Affinity has. And then my next honorable mention is it Blitz?
If you didn't say that, I was gonna.
Yeah, that was my next honorable mention. So why don't you talk about it? Why do you like Is It Blitz?
It is incredibly fast. It can beat Tron on those draws. It is a blue deck, so it also attacks it from the angle of it has counter spells. Mm-hmm. And then things like it does just beat Stompy in that it's just way faster than a Stompy deck. Blitz is not horribly placed right now. Removal spells are at an all-time low. Edicts are not played right now, really. Like Black-White Pestilence and Mono Black did place a few times, but I think Blitz it's definitely in a good spot. I have been playing against it, and some of the better players are testing it out, I think, and exploring that, and I see that as a sign of like, watch Is It Blitz.
Yeah, and for any of you who follow my my activities on the Twitterverse, I made a tweet today. I believe that Is It Blitz is the best Delver deck in the format.
Wow.
Yeah. They're playing Delver of Secrets. Even though they're not a Delver deck, I wouldn't consider them. They have Delver in them. And it's probably the best deck playing with Delver of Secrets right now. So yeah. It's got my vote for that, because I like me a Delver of Secrets.
I'm not going to say it's without problems, but
yeah, it has all the same problems that I've always had with the deck. You're trying to go all in on a single creature. That can be problematic against removal spells. You could just not draw any creatures. Like, you have those weird games where it's like, I drew a Kiln Fiend, and then they killed my Kiln Fiend, and then I didn't draw another creature. It does have its problems. It's not a deck that I would personally recommend playing.
But it is like one minor breakthrough from being like in that top 8. Yeah. I feel like a card upgrade, like they just figure out like, oh, this card is really good here. Okay. And then it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say it's definitely like at the top of the tier 2, tier 1.5 list of decks.
Yeah. And just, I think it hasn't caught on yet.
Okay. All done?
All done.
End times.
All right, well, that's the show. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Common Knowledge. Again, big thank you to all of our great sponsors at inkgaming.com and Game Grid Midvale. Check out their online store in the link below, and don't forget about that coupon code CCMTG10, good for a 10% discount on all Ink Gaming supplies and accessories. You can find the show on PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism YouTube channel. You can also send us an email if you'd like to at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. We love your emails. We love reading them. You can find the show on Twitter at CKPodcastMTG, as well as our ever-growing Facebook group, Common Knowledge. And Sean, where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8, that is Lobbert and the number 8, as well as YouTube. You can find me if you just search for Lobbert. I have videos of me playing Pauper, usually Pauper Leagues there, so check that out.
Boom, and you can find me also on Twitter at bclark_CK. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye forever.